Mod 11 group test. No decimals or negative exponents in your final answers. That goes for all problems on the test. All problems on the test. No decimal answers. If you get something that's a decimal, I would prefer you leave it as a fraction, as long as that fraction is reduced. And no negative exponents in any answers. Okay, these first ones we go through should go pretty quick. They're 1 point each, except for number 4 is 2 points. Write 12 to the 6/13 in radical form. There's 2 different ways you could write your answer. You could write it as the 13th root of 12 to the 6th, or you could write it as the 13th root of 12 to the 6th like that. Now, I would prefer that you do not write it both ways, but that you just pick one of those ways and write it. Why would I prefer that you don't write it both ways? Because I'm lazy. If you write it both ways, I have to grade both ways. Because if there's something wrong in one of them, then I have to take off points. So please only write one answer so that I can just grade one answer and move on with my day. Okay? Capiche? Good answer. All right. Write the 5th root of 3 to the 4th in rational exponent form. That would be 3 to the 4/5. Remember, your index is always the denominator. Same thing over here. Your index was the denominator. Okay? I also want to mention something. There are some people that when they get writing fast or sloppy, and you know who you are, they go like this, and then they start with good intentions of making that an exponent, but they end up writing their exponent like that, and it doesn't look like an exponent anymore, does it? That looks like 3 4/5. That's a problem. Please be deliberate that your exponents look like exponents and that it doesn't look like you're writing a mixed number. Make sense? You may laugh, but I could take pictures of all the times I see that, and it's probably 50 times any given test I'm grading. Okay? All right, number 3. A lot of people miss number 3 or missed partial credit on number 3. That exponent, what was that? I have to turn it into a fraction. But what people made the mistake of doing is they dealt with the 2 incorrectly. Does the 2 get the exponent of negative 1/8? No. So what's the exponent on the 2? If it's not negative 1/8, what's the exponent on it? 1. Which means that the 2 can stay on top. Right? It's got a positive exponent. It doesn't need to move. The x needs to move to the bottom, though. And it would have a positive 1/8 exponent. Now, it does say to write it in radical form. So if I put the x in radical form, what's the index of that x? Or of that radical would be an 8. And then the first power would just look like that. So it's only the x that gets the exponent there. So that's the only part that moves to the bottom. A lot of people put 1/2 8th root of x. Can't put the 2 on the bottom. Okay? So there? All right, what do the instructions say on number 4? Circle expressions equivalent to 65 x to the negative 5 halves, 625, sorry, x to the negative 5 halves, and what? Cross out expressions that are not equivalent, which means that every single option should either be circled or crossed out. Do you get that? Either circled or crossed out. So, this is actually very similar to this one in the sense that the 625 is not getting that exponent, is it? What would it look like if the 625 was getting that exponent? You would have parentheses. 625x would be in parentheses. That's when the exponent would apply to both the 625 and the x. So, as it stands, the 625 can stay on top. On the bottom, looks like these are all in radical form, so we got to go to radical. What's the index of the radical? Square root. Do I write a square root? I don't write a 2, do I? And then fifth power. Right away I can see which one should be circled. D. Looks just like mine. Are there any you can tell that should be crossed out because they are not equivalent to this? B should be crossed out. Why should B be crossed out? They flipped the index and the exponent, so that is incorrect. What else should be crossed out? C. Why should C be crossed out? 625 is on the bottom, and it's also getting that fifth, the 5 and the 2, which is doubly wrong. Should A be crossed out? Well, let's look at it a little further. What is 5 to the 4th power? 5 to the 4th power is 625. So that, if I simplify that, that is 625 over square root of x to the 5th. Does that mean the same thing as what I had over here? It's just the parentheses form, isn't it? So A should be circled, B and C should be, I'm sorry, A and D should be circled, B and C should be crossed out. So again, each option is either circled or crossed out. Questions there? Yes?
On the test, and if it says simplify that one, do you have to do A or D? Like if it were like number 3.
If it were like number 3, D would most likely be what your answer would look like. Well, your denominator could look like either this one or this one, and it doesn't matter. But your numerator, you wouldn't go to 5 to the 4th. You would call that 625. Okay? All right, number 5. Most people got that one right. If they got it wrong, it was a very simple reason why they got it wrong. If you got it wrong, chances are you wrote that as your answer. But what's the actual answer? Negative 36. This negative sign is not in parentheses with the 216, is it? So just like the previous ones, the negative sign actually stays out, and I have the cube root of 216 squared. What is the cube root of 216? 6. Squared is 36, and keep that negative sign with it. Okay? Once again, if that negative sign was in the parentheses, that would change it, but it's not. Okay? Questions about 1 through 5? Hopefully those are easy points, mostly. All right, now we get into some of the bigger point questions. Number 6. 6, 7, and 8 are all very, very similar to each other. What I can do, negative 128. Well, first off, you should kind of be taken aback a little bit seeing a negative under a radical. And then hopefully you look at the radical and see that the index is odd, and you're okay with a negative sign underneath there now. Yeah? The odd root of a negative number is going to be negative. So I just need to figure out what I can take out. Let's see, 128 is 2 times what? 64? 2 times 8. Nope. Sorry, 2 times 32. I'm jumping ahead of myself. That would be 2 times 16. 2 times 8. 2 times 4. And 2 times 2. How many 2's is that? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. How many of a kind do I need to take out? 7. So guess what? I have a negative 2. Okay? Another way I could think about that is, what's the exponent on 128? Is it 42? No. So it's just 1. I could think about this is negative 128 to the 1/7 power. And if I plug that into my calculator, negative 128 to the 1/7 power is negative 2. So I could think about it that way as well. Now m, that's going to be to the what power? 42 over 7. What is 42 over 7? Isn't it 6? So my answer is negative 2m to the 6th. So? Questions on that guy? Okay, because I'm going to use a very similar method for number 7. What's the exponent on 81? 1. So that means I have 81 to the 1/4. I have a to the 12/4. Yes? And b to the what? 32/4. What is 81 to the 1/4? 81 to the 1/4 power is 3. And then I think I can simplify these other exponents. What's 12/4? And 32/4? And nothing's left inside, is it? All comes out nicely. Questions there? All right. How is number 8 different than number 7? Since my exponent is out here, it's not just going to go to the x. Where else is it going to go? To the 6561, right? So I can write this as 6561 to the 6/8 and x to the 6/8. What is 6/8 if I reduce it? Three-fourths. Divide 6 1/2 and divide 8 1/2 and I get 3/4. So I have 6561 to the 3/4 and x to the 3/4. And I'm going to try going to my calculator. 6561, because I don't want to draw a tree for that. That'd be just way too huge. 6561 to the 3/4 power. That's going to be the equivalent of taking the 4th root of this number and then cubing it. I get 729. Does anyone know what the 4th root of 6561 is? If I go to my calculator, 4th root of 6561 is 9 to the 3rd power is 729. So that's where that comes from. And then x to the 3/4. There's my answer. Not too bad. All right, number 9. I have a fraction, but I have an exponent on that fraction. So what do I have to do? I have to apply that exponent to every part of the fraction. So let's see, x to the 5/2 to the 1/3. I'm going to multiply when I'm applying it to something that already has an exponent. So 5/2 times 1/3. 5 times 1 is 5. 2 times 3 is 6. On the bottom, 2 times 1/3 would be 2/3. Now, I can't leave my answer like this because I have matching bases, correct? My matching base is an x, which means that I have to do that whole top minus bottom thing. So let's see, on my calculator, 5, 6 minus 2/3, I get 1/6. My answer is x to the 1/6 power. Okay. Any questions on the front side? All right, backside. Number 10 is very similar to what I did on the last one. The only difference is there's more than one thing on the top. Do you see that? If I took this x off the top, then I have something just like the last problem. Since there's more than one thing, that just means that that exponent has to go to one more thing. So, on the top, I have x to the 1/3 times 2. What's 1/3 times 2? 2/3. And then y to the 5/3 times 2. What's 5/3 times 2? 10/3. And then on the bottom, I have y to the 3 to the 2. So 3 times 2 is 6. Now, I'm going to have to do that top minus bottom thing. But if you notice the x's, there's only one of them. So there is no top minus bottom. There's just top. So the x to the 2/3 stays. The y, I'm going to have to do 10/3 minus what? 6. So that's going to give me x to the 2/3 and y to the 10/3 minus 6. Negative 2 2/3. Well, we can't use mixed numbers. How do I change it to an improper fraction? second fraction button equals -8/3. I got a negative exponent. What does that mean? Move it to the denominator. So x to the 2/3 stays on top. Y on the bottom becomes 8/3 as an exponent, positive, because I've moved it. So I have x to the 2/3 over y to the 8/3. Questions there?
How did you subtract it? Like the y stuff?
The 10/3 minus 6, you just subtract the exponents.
Oh, okay.
Okay. All right, number 11 is sort of similar, but the parentheses aren't around the whole fraction like they were over here. They're just in the denominator. What does that mean? I only distribute to the denominator. So that 2 has to go to everything in the denominator and only the denominator. So the top is going to remain x, y to the 4/3. The denominator is going to be x, and then let's see, 1/3 times 2 is 2/3. And then 2/3 times 2 is 4/3. Do you notice anything interesting right here? It's going to cancel, right? Because they're the same. If I were to do the top minus bottom thing, what would I end up with? Y to the 0 power, which is 1. So it just drops out to 1. So I'm left with x over x to the 2/3. I can't leave that because I still have common base. So I'm going to have to do the top exponent, which is 1, minus the bottom exponent, which is 2/3. What's 1 minus 2/3? 1/3? You can do that on your calculator, but hopefully you can also do it in your head. That gives me x to the 1/3 as my answer. Questions there? Now, how many points is this test? It's 50 points, right? Which I'll scale to 100 in your book. But I think we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 questions that are all worth 4 points, which means that's 24 points for that section. That's like half your test, right? So make sure you study that section. All right, the last set, solve and do what? Check for extraneous solutions. I guarantee you there will be at least one extraneous solution. What do I mean by at least one? One or more. Okay? Now, extraneous solutions will only happen in certain types of problems. We only have to check our answers in those certain types of problems. Do you remember when that is? When the index is even. So, in number 12, do I have an even index?
Yes.
Yes. How can I tell? Because in a fraction form, it's the denominator that's the index. In number 13, do I have an even index?
No.
14, do I have an even index?
Yes.
There's no index written, which means it's an index of 2, which is even. In number 15, do I have an even index? No. So, 12 and 14 are the ones where my extraneous solutions could possibly happen. They will not happen in 13 and 15 because those have odd indexes. I have to check my answers for 12 and 14. I can check my answers for 13 and 15. If I have a couple extra minutes as I'm taking the test, I would highly recommend doing that. Or, if I'm a little bit unsure about the process that I did, if I did it correctly, then I would take the time to check my answer on those guys also. But these are the ones that I absolutely have to. Okay? All right, so what do I need to do first for number 12? Crickets. I need to get that thing with the exponent by itself. So what do I need to do? Add 7, because I need it by itself. That leaves me with 3x plus 4 to the 3/2 power equals what? 125. Now that thing with the exponent is by itself. So what can I do now? How do I get rid of the exponent? I raise both sides to the reciprocal power. So I'm not multiplying by 2/3. I'm raising both sides to the 2/3 power. Yeah? That's going to leave me with 3x plus 4 equals what? 125 to the 2/3. What is 125 to the 2/3? What is it? 25. Because it's the cube root of 125, which is 5, squared, which is 25. All right, now we've got something fairly simple. I'm going to subtract 4. 3x equals 21. And x equals 7. Now, before I go and write it on my answer line, I need to make sure that it's true. So coming back to the original problem, I need to check, does 3 times 7 plus 4 all raised to the 3/2 power and subtract 7, does that give me 118? Well, let's see. 21 plus 4 to the 3/2. Still checking here. That would be 25 to the 3/2. What is 25 to the 3/2? It's the square root of 25, which is 5. Cubed is, does 125 minus 7 equal 118? Yep. So my answer checks out. I can put my answer of 7 on the line. Questions there? Okay. Number 13. Is the thing with the exponent by itself?
No.
No. So what do I need to do to get it by itself? Multiply both sides by 2. What's that going to get rid of? The 1/2. I cannot raise to a power until that 1/2 is gone. So I'm going to multiply both sides by 2, which is the reciprocal of 1/2. That's going to leave me with 2x plus 8 to the 1/3 power equals what? -1 times 2 is -2. Now is the thing with the exponent by itself? Yes. So I'm ready to raise both sides to a power. What am I raising both sides to? The 3/1, which is just the 3rd power, right? That's going to cancel. I have 2x plus 8 equals what? -2 to the 3rd power is what? -8. So now let's see. Subtract 8. 2x equals -16. And x equals -8. Can I check my answer if I want to? Sure, let's do it. 1/2 times 2 times -8 plus 8. I want to know if that to the 1/3 power equals -1. Let's see. 1/2. 2 times -8 would be -16 plus 8. So let's see. -16 plus 8 is -8. What is -8 to the 1/3? That's the cube root of -8, which is -2. 1/2 times -2 is -1. So if I have the time to check it, go ahead and check it. My answer is -8. Okay. Any questions there? All right. Number 14. Let me see if I can find... Number 14 was a strange one because if you used the wrong process, you surprisingly got the correct answer unintentionally. That will not happen every time. Let's see. I think I took a picture of it. That's what I got. What is incorrect? That's the correct answer. But what's incorrect about that process? They squared this side, but they didn't square this side. Now, in this problem, that happened to still lead you to the correct answer, But that's not going to happen 99.9% of the time. So I want to make sure that even if you got a 10 as your answer, if you got it marked wrong, make sure you follow along with my process as I'm doing it to see why you had an error there. Okay? All right, so one of my radical is by itself, so I'm ready to do what? Square both sides. Why am I going to square both sides? Why am I not going to cube it? Or fourth it? Or fifth it? Because it's a square root. Square root has an index of 2, and so the exponent I'm using is going to cancel out that index of 2. That leaves me with 71 minus 7n. How do I square n minus 9? I have to write n minus 9 times n minus 9. If I write n squared plus 81, I'm going to go the wrong place. Can't do that. I have to FOIL. I promise you there will be a problem on the test where you have to FOIL like this. This gives me n squared minus 9n minus 9n plus 81. And if I combine my like terms, I have n squared minus 18n plus 81. What do I do from here? Subtract 71. Why? Since I have an n squared, I need to get everything to the same side as the n squared so I can what? Factor to get my answers. So I'm going to subtract 71. So negative 7n equals n squared minus 18n plus 10. And then I'm going to add 7n. 0 equals n squared minus 11n plus 10. If I snowflake that. I think I have negative 10 and negative 1. Right? Negative 10 times negative 1 equals positive 10. Negative 10 plus negative 1 equals negative 11. So that gives me n minus 10 and n minus 1. I get an answer of n equals 10 and n equals 1. Yes? I got to check both those answers. I'm going to start off by checking 10. So, does the square root of 71 minus 7 times 10, does that equal 10 minus 9? Well, that would be the square root of 71 minus 70. And I want to know, does that equal 1? That's the square root of 1. And it does check out. So n equals 10 is a good answer. So I'm going to go ahead and write 10 in my box, or in my answer spot. What about n equals 1? That would be, let's see, square root of 71 minus 7 times 1. Does that equal 1 minus 9? That would be 71 minus 7. This is negative 8. I can stop there because I should know that the square root of something is never going to be negative. But I end up with the square root of 64 equals negative 8. Well, the square root of 64 is not negative 8. What is it? It's positive 8. And positive 8 does not equal negative 8. So n equals 1 is extraneous. So I just leave it off my answer line. The only number on my answer line is 10. So? All right, ready for the last one? Good answer. All right, I have radicals on both sides. Is at least one of my radicals by itself? Okay, so I'm ready to raise both sides. What am I going to raise both sides to? The third power, because that's what's going to cancel out the index of 3. So, this side is easy. I get 5x plus 1. What's tricky over here? The 2 has to get the exponent as well as the radical. So 2 to the third gives me 8. And then I have 5 minus x because the radical will cancel out. Biggest place where people miss this, they leave that as a 2 instead of turning it to an 8. Or they'll make it a 6. I'll get that all the time. Why would you put a 6 there? What would that mistake be? 2 times 3 instead of 2 to the third power. All right, so I'm going to distribute. 8 times 5 is 40. 8 times negative x is negative 8x equals 5x plus 1. I'm going to add 8x. Yes, you could move the 5x if you wanted to. I like things positive, so I go that way. You'd end up with the same answer, though. Subtract 1. 39 equals 13x. Divide by 13. And x equals what? 3. Do I need to check my answer? No, because it's an odd index. But could I? Yep. So I'm going to check it just to make sure, because I have a couple extra minutes. Is 2 times the cube root of 5 minus 3 equal to the cube root of 5 times 3 plus 1. And I'm running out of paper there. So 2 times the cube root of 5 minus 3 is 2. Does that equal the cube root of 15 plus 1? Now 2 times the cube root of 2 is not a pretty number, is it? So I'm just going to leave it as 2 cube root of 2 and see if this ends up being 2 cube root of 2 also. Because if it does, then they're equal. So let's see. I've got the cube root of 16. If I were to draw a tree for 16, it's 2 and 8, 2 and 4, 2 and 2. What can I take out? I would need a group of 3, so that means I have 1 2 outside and another 2 inside, and my index is 3. Do they equal? They do equal, so my answer does check out. I write my answer of 3 on the line, and I'm done. Okay. Again, the odd indexes you do not have to check. However, if you are at all uncertain about your process, make sure to check it. Or if you have extra time at the end of your test, check it to make sure that you have the correct answer. Okay? Happy studying.